Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Commander Brett Westcott. We warmly welcome the family of Sergeant Lewis McGee, VC, whose story will be told shortly. We are honoured to acknowledge the current serving personnel of the Royal Australian Navy's HMAS Canberra and the members of the Royal Australian Air Force 1RTU training course 12/19th who are attending this evening's ceremony. We also warmly welcome the attending representatives from the Tweed Byron Police District and Central West Police District Active Citizens programs. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and their families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching the ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family, visitors, as well as students on behalf of the following schools. From Tasmania, Deloraine High School, and from Western Australia, Newman Senior High School. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Sergeant Lewis McGee. Lewis McGee was born on the 13th of May, 1888, at Verwood, near Ross, in central Tasmania. He was the youngest of 11 children born to John and Mary McGee. McGee's mother passed away when he was only 7 years old, and soon after her death, the family moved from Ross to Avoca, further to the north. Known as Lou to his family and friends, McGee worked as an engine driver and was a talented local sportsman who was involved in the Avoca Cycling Club. On the 15th of November 1914, he married Eileen Rose Bailey. The couple had one child together, a daughter named Nada, who was born in 1915. McGee enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 1st of March 1916, one of the first men to volunteer for the newly formed 40th Infantry Battalion in Tasmania. McGee began training with the 40th Battalion at Claremont in Hobart, and 3 months later sailed for overseas duty. McGee arrived with the 40th Battalion in England in August 1916, and he continued his training at Larkhill in Wiltshire. In November 1916, he sailed for France and the war on the Western Front. McGee and the 40th Battalion arrived in France just in time to spend the bitterest winter in living memory in the trenches. Throughout the cold winter, they occupied the waterlogged trenches around Armentières in northern France. They came under intermittent enemy shell fire and conducted raids on the German lines. McGee distinguished himself as a talented and capable soldier, and on the 12th of January was promoted to the rank of sergeant. In May 1917, McGee and the 40th Battalion moved north to Belgium, where the British and Commonwealth forces were focusing their operations around the medieval town of Ypres. On the 7th of June, they took part in the Battle of Messines, a successful operation in which Australian, British and New Zealand troops captured strategically important high ground in Ypres after igniting nearly 500 tonnes of explosive dug into mines underneath the German trenches. The Australians suffered nearly 7,000 casualties in this battle alone. On the 4th of October, McGee and the 40th Battalion participated in the bloody fighting around Brunsinda, one of a series of battles fought by the British and Commonwealth troops as they advanced towards Passchendaele. In torrential rain, Australian and New Zealand troops advanced across no man's land after a heavy artillery bombardment. McGee and his platoon came under intense German artillery and machine gun fire, and at one point were prevented from advancing by heavy fire from a fortified concrete structure known as a pillbox. As the men of his platoon sought cover in shell holes, McGee, armed only with a revolver, leapt to his feet, crossed 50 metres of open ground towards the concrete structure, and killed or captured the German occupants. His heroic action allowed the rest of his platoon to continue the advance and contributed to the successful conclusion of the battle. For his conspicuous bravery in this action, McGee was awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest award for gallantry in the face of the enemy. His citation stated that he led his platoon with great dash against all obstacles under heavy fire, and that throughout the whole operation, his bravery and coolness stood out as a splendid example to everyone. His heroic action also saw him recommended for a commission. Just 8 days later, on the 12th of October 1917, McGee and the 40th Battalion once again manned the frontline trenches in preparations for an assault on German lines, which has since become known as the First Battle of Passchendaele. In pouring rain and deep mud, the men launched their attack at dawn after a largely ineffective artillery barrage on the German positions. One report states that as his company prepared for the advance, McGee said to a fellow soldier, "How glad I am to be here. I wouldn't have missed this for anything." He then turned to his men and called out, "Steady lads, keep a good line." Heavy German machine gun fire then fell on the men. McGee stood firm and began to rush the enemy, but was killed instantly by a bullet wound to his head. He was 29 years old, survived by his young wife and daughter. His grieving wife was presented with his posthumous Victoria Cross in Launceston in March 1918. Today, Sergeant McGee's remains lie buried in the Tyncott Cemetery in Belgium, within sight of the area where he won his Victoria Cross, less than a kilometre from where he was killed. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Sergeant Lewis McGee, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall not grow old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen and students, that concludes the last post ceremony. We'd like to thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.